watermelons. A fruit that's sweet, refreshing, and surprisingly at the center of one of NASCAR's most unique rise to fame stories. Because before he was a NASCAR Cup Series winner, before he shocked the motorsports world with a move never before seen, and before he went toe-to-toe with the biggest names in stock car racing, Ross Chastain was just a farmer. And for him, the journey to get to stardom in NASCAR would be a long and difficult one, slowly rising through the ranks of NASCAR, driving for underfunded teams year after year, waiting to get a chance to drive for a highly funded team, until he'd finally get the opportunity to prove what he could do in a competitive car, and it would be history from there. The Chastains had been farming watermelons in South Florida for over a century when Ross was born on December 4th, 1992, adding him to a long list of farmers in the family. Being a farmer meant long hours and tough work in the humid and hot Florida weather for Chastain, creating a hard-working, never-give-up mindset that would end up carrying over into his future NASCAR career, which, beginning at the age of 12, was officially ignited, when in 2005 Ross's father Ralph Chastain created his interest in racing by taking him to their local track, where Ross quickly fell in love with the sport. His father would ask if driving was something he was interested in doing, to which Ross agreed, and with the help of some of his father's friends, they'd get the equipment necessary to be able to race. Over the next few years, him and his family continued to get more into racing, but Chastain's father instilled the idea into Ross's mind that NASCAR was off the table for him as a future, due to their shoestring budget compared to the other teenagers he was competing with at the time, who were backed by major sponsors, instead wanting him to stick to racing on the short track scene, which is much more affordable than NASCAR. However, things ended up changing during the World Series at New Smyrna Speedway in 2011, a 9-race short track event that ran throughout NASCAR Speed Weeks, when while driving a limited late model, Chastain went on to win 3 of the races ran during those nights, leading to him and his father taking the massive risk to shift their focus and funding into NASCAR to chase a dream, choosing a one-shot NASCAR deal in the 3rd-tier truck series with their money instead of a full season of late model racing. Chastain's debut would come during the August 1st race at IRP, driving the number 66 for Turn 1 Racing at just 18 years old, after normal driver Justin Marks left the team midway through the season. In his NASCAR debut, Chastain impressed immediately, taking a truck that normally ran mid-pack to qualify 15th out of 36 with no prior experience, later carrying this momentum over into the race by spending most of the 200 laps in the top 15 or fighting for a top 10 spot, eventually ending the night with an astounding top 10 finish of 10th, just one spot off of Justin Marks' best finish of 9th in his 12 races that he'd ran with the team throughout the season. His impressive showing earned him even more watermelon-based sponsors to join and fund him, allowing him to compete in 4 more races throughout the remainder of 2011 with an assortment of teams. Chastain's development would continue on even further in 2012, as he'd again be given another opportunity to drive in NASCAR, this time for the entire season at 19 years old, running in the 08 for SS Greenlight Racing in the Truck Series. But this would come with a cost, as driving full-time in NASCAR would force him to leave everything he knew to move from his home in Florida up to where most NASCAR drivers live in North Carolina, staying inside his owner's team shop for a place to stay. The season kicked off in Daytona, which is a great place for mid-pack and underfunded teams in the sport to secure a good finish compared to the other 85% of the races on the schedule, as with the draft and high amount of crashes seen in those races, it presents a phenomenal opportunity to put up a great run if you can avoid the carnage throughout the day. But Chastain's first trip to the speedway would unfortunately end with him being involved in a crash just near the end of the race with 7 laps remaining, after barely getting clipped trying to avoid the crash in front of him, sending him spinning into the inside wall. Driving for a small team in the Truck Series with little experience, he'd struggled throughout the season with the equipment given, DNFing 9 times in 22 races, with 7 of them being out of his doing with mechanical issues, eventually leading him to finish second to last among full-time drivers in the series, just 31 points ahead of Brian Silas. However, he'd show flashes of brilliance at tracks where the equipment is less important, and the driving talent is more on display, earning a 7th place run at the half-mile Martinsville, before a season-defining run in another half-mile in Bristol, where he'd drive from 18th to 3rd in the final 40 laps of the race. The success from Bristol went on to assist with Chastain earning the biggest deal of his young racing career, signing on with that year's Cup champion Brad Keselowski to drive for his truck team in 14 races, alongside Keselowski himself and his Cup Series teammate Joey Logano, presenting an amazing opportunity for the young Chastain to compete in top equipment, while also being alongside some of the sport's youngest and most up-and-coming Cup Series drivers. However, his first crack in a top truck would be a struggle in the first half of the season, only finishing on the lead lap 3 times with just one top 10 finish, while full-time teammate Ryan Blaney earned a win at Pocono and had just one finish not on the lead lap in double the starts of him. Yet Chastain turned it up for his final set of races, first with the 7th place run at the debut of Canadian Tire, being followed up the next week at Iowa with his best ever NASCAR run, starting up by capturing his first career pole and going on to dominate the race, leading 116 of the 212 laps, while even earning a lucky break from his teammate running out of gas before a green-white checker to put him in prime position to win. But on the final restart, Chastain would come up short and lose the lead with 2 to go at the hands of James Buescher, being forced to settle with a 2nd place run. He'd be granted a chance to be in the same position at Phoenix a few starts later by winning the pole once again and dominating the race alongside Eric Jones. Yet just like Iowa, he'd be passed late in the race to lose the win.
But Jones is faster, Phil. He's going to be able to get to the inside of Chastain, and here he comes.
Looking to the inside to take away the lead. Through the dog leg, down the backstretch. Here comes Eric Jones. He'll take the lead away going into 3.
Chastain would be left in 2nd once again, and with an 8th place run the following week at Homestead to conclude the season, he was once again out of a ride in NASCAR. 1 year removed from his life-changing break, putting him right back to square one. For the 2014 season, to keep his career afloat, Ross would once again have to drive mid-pack equipment, joining Ricky Benson Racing driving the 92 in the Truck Series full-time. However, after crashing out of the opening race at Daytona and finishing 14th at Martinsville, he'd be fired from the team following just his 2nd race for comments he'd make, leaving him jobless nearly 2 months into the NASCAR season. At this point, a young Chastain was told by people to go back to his family farm and quit racing, eventually choosing to go back and work on the farm to allow him to think about his career and what his goals were, leading him back to NASCAR soon after just a few months later. He'd return in a new series from what he was used to, moving up to the Nationwide Series just one step below Cup, driving in a one-off race for Viva Motorsports in the 55 car at Charlotte. And before we go over his next career chapter, you should subscribe to my channel. It's free, and if you don't like it, you can simply unsubscribe. Anyways, in his debut, Chastain went out and earned the team's best run of the season up to that point, compared to the normal driver, ending the day with an 18th place finish. He'd follow up his impressive debut by taking matters into his own hands to get his next opportunity, choosing to call Hattori Racing's team owner to ask if he could compete in their car for him at Michigan, due to the normal driver Johnny Sauter being away running a truck race that was occurring on the same day. Hattori agreed to let him drive, and after Chastain earned a 12th place run in the first race with them, he'd be brought back on for multiple starts throughout 2014. During the starts, Ross would go out and impress, collecting his and the team's first top 10 finish, while also showing to other teams in the series that he had what it took to compete, with a special ability to get more out of the equipment he was driving. These tools assisted him in earning a job with JD Motorsports in NASCAR's second-tier Xfinity series for 2015, a ride that ended up saving his career in the sport, while stopping him from having to go back to farming full-time, as without the 4-car, he'd be left without any more options in NASCAR. His first race with them kicked off at Daytona, starting off with a bittersweet run, as on one hand he'd collect a solid 9th place finish, his best ever run in a NASCAR Xfinity race, but on the other, he'd be robbed from a chance at competing for the win on the white flag after being blindsided by a spinning Kyle Larson while running in 2nd. Outside of this run, his season went as expected for a person driving for a mid-pack team in the Xfinity series, seeing him run between 15th to 25th every week. And that's about how his entire tenure over the next few years in the series went, driving for JD Motorsports. Yet around this time his aggressive on-track style began to show and rub drivers the wrong way. First in 2015 with an altercation involving Ryan Reed, after moving him into turn 1 on a green-white checkered restart, leading to Reed shoving Chastain on pit road during the post-race and vowing payback on him. This would be followed by an incident a few years later in 2017, where he'd punched Jeremy Clements after he grabbed his shoulder, following an on-track move to gain a position. And finally, when Brendan Gaughan and his team of over 20 guys allegedly waited for Chastain after the 2017 Fall Texas race to fight him, leading to multiple punches being thrown, and one member of Garrett Smithley's crew getting sent to the hospital with a head injury. Chastain would respond to this by saying, "It's some scary stuff for sure. I'm glad the cameras weren't there, because that's not the kind of publicity the sport needs at all." On a more positive note for Ross, 2017 marked an achievement that every driver who enters NASCAR hopes to earn, making his NASCAR Cup Series debut on June 4, 2017, driving for the very underfunded Premium Motorsports, qualifying 36th and finishing 20th in his debut. However, in 2018, as in the middle of another year running for JD Motorsports with middling results, seeming like his career was going nowhere, 5-star Xfinity team owner Chip Ganassi and sponsor DC Solar personally selected Chastain to drive the 42 car in 3 races, due to driver John Hunter Nemechek not having any sponsorship for those events, presenting Chastain a lottery ticket to drive in possibly the best car in the series, with the founder and CEO of DC Solar stating, "My wife and I have gotten to know Ross through some of our relationships off the track, and have admired his hard work and willingness to do whatever it takes to continue progressing his racing career. We appreciate and respect those qualities, and when the opportunity arose for that hard work to be recognized, we were happy to jump in and support that effort. This strong combination of talents with both team and driver will be exciting to watch, and we can't wait to see what they can do together." His first of 3 make-or-break races in the car would come on September 1st, 2018, coincidentally at the most difficult track NASCAR had to offer, in Darlington Raceway. As due to the limited space to race on the surface, it meant with near certainty that if you made a slight mistake you were hitting the fence. And to add on top of it, the track was a hotspot in this series for Cup drivers to drop down and race in, seeing 3 of the best NASCAR had to offer of Denny Hamlin, Brad Keselowski, and Kevin Harvick all showing up to race. However, Chastain immediately outqualified all of them to earn his first career pole, besting top prospect Christopher Bell by 400ths, who had already won 4 races throughout the year. Once the green flag dropped on race day, Chastain dominated and won the first stage of the race, yet would be passed by Kevin Harvick on the ensuing restart, soon passing him back 18 laps later to retake the lead, and once again go on to collect another stage win. On the restart he'd hold the lead this time, but received pressure from Cup drivers Brad Keselowski and Kevin Harvick, being forced to drive with everything he had to hold the lead with just over 40 to go. Yet after many laps of sitting in Harvick's way, he grew impatient of him, eventually choosing to send it 3 wide using a lap car on the inside of an already narrow corner.
He slides up. They both run out of real estate. I'm not sure how hard the 98 was into the 42 before the 42 hit the outside wall.
2 weeks later on September 15th, Chastain returned back to the 42 car at Las Vegas, this time with a chip on his shoulder, going on to lead all but 20 of the 200 laps, and finally do what he and his family dreamed of doing when they first put together the funds to put Ross in a truck ride 7 years prior.
The opportunity given to Ross Chastain. Coming out of turn number 4, he's going to earn his first win in the Xfinity Series.
Good job, boys. Good job, buddy. Good job, Big Crew. That's my job. Thank y'all so much.
You heard the team telling him, "Hey man, do your burnout."
So you have to wonder if Ross Chastain in May is considering how to do burnouts. You know, I mean, this is not something that was on Ross Chastain's mind until he got this opportunity.
He ended out his 3-race stretch with the team by finishing in 2nd place the following week at Richmond, doing more than enough to impress in his time driving the 42. And on November 9, 2018, Chastain's amazing performance paid off when Chip Ganassi Racing announced a full season of him in the number 42 car for 2019, with DC Solar as sponsorship. But just as quickly as everything changed in his career, everything would fall apart, as just 1 month later on December 18, 2018, sponsor DC Solar was raided by the FBI and outed as a $1 billion Ponzi scheme, leading to CEO Jeff Karpoff being sentenced to 30 years in prison and being ordered to pay over $790 million in restitution for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. And just like that, with all his sponsorship money gone in the blink of an eye, Ganassi was forced to shut down his Xfinity Series operation, putting Chastain right back to where he started 2018 at, returning back to JD Motorsports, while also teaming up with the up-and-coming Colleague Motorsports part-time for a few races in 2019. Along with the full-time Xfinity season, Chastain also signed on to drive the 45 full-time in the Truck Series as well, driving for Nice Motorsports. Yet he'd be running without earning points for them, as prior to the season he'd declared in NASCAR that he'd be running only for Xfinity Series points. His move back to truck saw him choose to join a team in Nice Motorsports, who had just 3 top 10s in its entire history of existence, just to race more often. However, something incredible happened, and the team started off with a 3rd place run at Daytona. A great finish, but underfunded teams do well there all the time, yet they managed to keep up the speed over the following races. A 6th the next week at Atlanta, then 10th, then 4th after leading 53 laps, and at this point Chastain seemed like a winning threat. 2 more top 10s followed in the coming weeks, before the day finally arrived for Ross Chastain to become a winner in the NASCAR Truck Series.
Ross Chastain
Are you kidding me?
is going to add his name to the list. Ross Chastain bringing it to the line. He's going to win at Kansas.
Oh, yes! Good job, Al! Thank you! It's over, right? Yes, sir, it is.
At this point, Chastain was left with a choice: continue racing in the Xfinity Series for points, or risk his entire career and cost his longtime team JD Motorsports hundreds of thousands of dollars to drop out of points contention in the Xfinity Series and instead race for points with Nice Motorsports in the trucks, 8 races behind compared to the other drivers. Chastain would take the risk and went with the second option, beginning his grind toward the Truck Championship during the 9th race of the year at Texas, with the goal of winning himself into the playoffs before they started in 8 races, otherwise the entire change would be pointless. He'd kick off the switch with a 10th at Texas, before going out and leading 141 of the 200 laps at Iowa during the following race to capture the win. That wasn't until the truck was found to be just a few inches short in post-race inspection, forcing NASCAR to strip him of all the points earned and the win, making it utterly useless. However, just 1 week later in St. Louis, he'd make sure the penalty didn't matter.
Racing redemption at his hands. The wheel for Ross Chastain is still and perfect, and he has done it. Winning at Gateway.
Nice job. Thank you, Phil. Thank you. Al, yes, guys. Good job.
With this win, Chastain was locked into the playoffs, officially validating his choice to swap points between series, kicking off his run at a championship with a 3rd at Bristol, 8th at Canadian Tire, and 2nd at Las Vegas to easily advance him to the round of 6. And although he'd throw a terrible block to crash out of Talladega to open up the following round, a runner-up at Martinsville and a 9th at Phoenix advanced him to the Championship 4, presenting him with an opportunity to win a NASCAR championship. After years of grinding through NASCAR, Chastain was finally in a position to be crowned a champion of the sport. However, in the Final 4 race, he'd be outdueled by the veteran Matt Crafton over the course of a 67-lap green flag run to end the event. A miracle considering his first 8 races weren't accounted for. But most importantly, his career was once again going towards an upward trend, as he'd also earn a win at the World Center of Racing in Daytona, driving in select starts with Colleague Racing in the Xfinity Series. Owner Matt Colleague knew Chastain had what it took to drive a competitive stock car, so on October 15, 2019, it was announced that he was returning back to the Xfinity Series for 2020, this time with a sponsor that wasn't a billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. In this ride, he'd put together an impressively consistent regular season, finishing just 3 of the 26 races outside of the top 10, but was never able to find victory lane. Although he'd come close during a fierce late race battle against Denny Hamlin and Darlington, yet was unable to prevail.
Jones knows anything can happen. Let's take a look. What happens? The 54 right at the left rear quarter panel of the 10.
Trying to pass him clean. They come off of turn 2, side by side for the lead.
Yeah, this could get the slide job that he's looking for right here. He's got more momentum this time.
Right rear. Trying to keep on his right rear.
He's out front, but can he hold it against the wall? He gets into the wall. So does the 10. Contact made. Here comes the 19. Brandon Jones is leading. 1 lap to go.
Nevertheless, he was still able to make the playoffs, yet was swiftly eliminated just before the Championship 4 race at Phoenix. But it wouldn't matter, because after a decade of work through the lower series of NASCAR, fighting and clawing for every ride he had, Ross Chastain finally earned a full-time Cup Series ride with a top organization, joining on with Chip Ganassi Racing to replace Kyle Larson in the 42 car in 2021, the same car and number that he was supposed to drive 2 years prior in Xfinity. But how would he perform in the Cup Series? Well, Chastain's long-awaited season would end up being quiet and sorta lackluster, as outside of a few impressive runs, including a 2nd place at Nashville and a 3rd place at Darlington, he'd find himself running in the mid-pack more often than not during his first full-time Cup season in competitive equipment, seeing him get blown out of the water compared to his veteran teammate Kurt Busch by season's end in the stats department. And to make matters worse, just 4 months into earning his ride, Chip Ganassi Racing announced they would be shutting their doors following the 2021 season and selling all their assets and charters, leaving Chastain without a job once again. However, they wouldn't just sell the team to anyone, they'd sell it to Justin Marks, the same guy who Chastain got his ride from all the way back in 2011 in his Truck Series debut, and just so happened to co-own Trackhouse Racing with Artist Pitbull, a team that was on the forefront of a new generation of NASCAR teams and an entirely new car. So when it came to choosing someone to pilot a second car as a teammate to Daniel Suarez, Justin Marks should have no issues picking Ross Chastain as the guy for the job, going on to state, "Trackhouse, we're trying to build something real special for the future. And that means recognizing talent that sort of is at a point in their career where they've got experience, but they're young and still building their career. That's what we feel we have with Daniel, and now for sure we have with Ross. He's got a number of Cup starts under his belt, just like Daniel, and when he's been sitting in race-winning equipment, he's gotten the job done. This is a talent and skill that is independent of how fast you can go. We've got 2 closers on this team now." And with that, Chastain set his eyes forward to 2022. 2022 is a clean slate for the entire Cup garage with a new next-gen car, and along with the increased parity, due to everyone buying from the same part supplier, it meant this was the perfect time for Chastain to break out. But a dead last finish in the Daytona 500 after being involved in the opening stage Big One, and a violent single-car crash in the next-gen's first practice session on a non-super speedway before a 29th place finish 2 laps down in the race showed that he could be overmatched by the new car. Yet the next week at Las Vegas he'd shock everyone in the sport, as after starting 18th in the field, he'd quickly drive up through it and take the lead just after lap 100, going on to dominate the middle portions of the race, leading a race high of 83 laps. However, under a cycle of green flag pit stops, he'd lose the lead to Kyle Busch with 43 to go, being unable to run him down during the green flag run and during the late race restart, having to settle with a 3rd place. He'd return back the next week at Phoenix with a runner-up finish, and at Atlanta he'd lead 42 laps before blowing a tire while leading, going down 2 laps, getting those laps back, and managing to come back to finish 2nd, bringing him up to 3 podiums in a row before the series went to Coda for the first road course of the year, where after 121 starts in the Cup Series over the course of 6 years, he'd beat and banged with one of the best road course racers in the business in AJ Allmendinger to seal him and his team's first ever Cup win.
160 miles an hour down this back straightaway to turn 12, and then down to 45 miles an hour right here.
Much ground AJ Allmendinger gains right there.
But Chastain didn't miss the apex.
He's on him.
Allmendinger's there.
Opening door up.
He won't open this one up though, right here.
Nope. Oh, he's going to use.
AJ's going to open it for him.
Moved him.
Moved him. AJ moved him.
Is he going to get moved
Chastain
back?
comes back.
Chastain, will he answer?
And Bowman wants to steal it.
No, that he'll get the chance. Bowman's under him.
Oh my God.
Chastain's going to have to move them both.
Are you
You're going to have to move them both.
Oh,
He is.
oh!
And around goes Allmendinger off the bumper of Chastain. And Ross Chastain beats and bangs his way to turn 20 and off the corner to the checkered flag.
Hey, I don't mind that. He got moved and moved him back.
Absolutely.
Great job, boy.
The hot streak continued on for him following this, as after finishing 5th 2 weeks later at Martinsville, he'd once again find himself back in victory lane, this time at Talladega, after the wind virtually fell directly into his lap in the tri-oval.
Kyle Larson, big push. Does it go to the outside?
He's going to have to. Here he goes.
And he's in the wall.
Opens the door up for the one of Ross Chastain.
And on the outside, Kyle Larson added. Oh my gosh.
He'd be riding high after a stellar start, yet immediately following this, he'd start a streak like no other driver had ever done in NASCAR, doing moves no other driver had done, while pissing off more drivers in a shorter time frame than anyone had done before. He'd start off this rampage by cutting Martin Truex Jr. off on the white flag at Dover, causing him to wreck for 3rd place, ramping off Kyle Busch in the All-Star race after he blew a tire, and sending it 4 wide for the Coca-Cola 600 win with 2 to go but wrecking out. However, the following week in St. Louis, he'd step too far out of line on 2 separate occasions and gain an enemy in the process.
Here we go.
Yes, he might be.
Here we go. Oh.
Out there on your tie, really tight.
Oh. We are intensely watching.
I can. Well, let's listen to this.
This is number 11.
35, back to the 2 and 1. The tower just said they think you made your point. You're right.
And that puts a period on that.
Timing's a little bit better, but Chastain may wreck him again.
This is good.
He's definitely messing with him.
Inside. Ken.
Oh.
They were 3 wide. Well, Denny didn't, but
Oh, jeez.
What a double.
It's a double up.
A double tag team.
And Denny's not giving him any room at all.
I'm going to tell you what, this is a show.
Now, there's only one solution to this. Park them both.
What are you going to do about Chase?
But look at the enjoyment we're getting.
Yeah.
Tell you, man, nothing behind you guys here.
Chastain climbed out of the car following the race and said he quote-unquote drove over his head and apologized to Hamlin. But 3 weeks later at Atlanta, he'd end up going too far.
2nd position.
Truex back to the bottom.
Oh! The 11 sideways. Can he hang on to it? They wreck.
So this is the frustration I think drivers have with Ross Chastain. When you interview him, he talks about how he's going to try to do it differently and race differently, and then here we are. He just climbs the banking. I'm sure his car is probably not handling as he had hoped, but his contact spins Denny Hamlin out.
I'm with you, Steve. You got a gas pedal in there.
Hamlin stated he'd reached his peak with Chastain after this, and it would just so happen that 2 weeks later, these 2 drivers would end up going for a win against each other at Pocono late in the event.
They lean on each other a little bit, Chastain.
Oh! Hard into the wall. He goes around. He'll hit the inside wall as well.
With the Hamlin feud seemingly out of the way with that retaliation, Chastain set his eyes towards the playoffs, being seated as the 3rd driver in the standings with 20 playoff points. And with 2 top 10s of 7th and 6th, he'd easily get through the round of 16, while also just narrowly making it through the round of 12 by just 6 points after finishing dead last in the cutoff race at the Roval. Nevertheless though, Chastain had made it to the round of 8, hoping to seal his way into the Final Four at Phoenix with the win at any of the races during the round. He'd start off the round by coming excruciatingly close to victory in the opening race at Las Vegas by leading 68 laps throughout the day, but losing the lead to a hard-charging Joey Logano with 3 laps remaining, leaving him in second place to end the day. The same place he'd finish the next week at Homestead, to slot him 19 points ahead of the cut line entering the final race of the round at Martinsville. When it comes to pressure-filled racing, there are just a few moments in a NASCAR driver's season that are as intense as the round of 8 cutoff race while not being locked in, as it's the final chance for drivers to secure a spot in the Championship 4, and with their entire season on the line, it causes drivers to take risks they normally wouldn't do. Chastain rolled off the grid in 9th place, needing to best Denny Hamlin and William Byron throughout the day to advance. A notoriously tough task considering Hamlin had dominated the track over the years, while Byron had just won the last race ran there 6 months prior. Through the first 2 stages of the race, Hamlin did what was expected and dominated, taking the lead on lap 120 and winning the first 2 stages, while Chastain failed to find top 5 speed, running in the back half of the top 10 for most of the event as Byron struggled, eventually failing to stay on the lead lap. Yet once stage 3 restarted, Chastain immediately spun Brad Keselowski to bring Byron right back to the lead lap, but by then the 24 was already in a must-win situation. With just under 200 to go, it was evident that as long as there was no new winner from below the cut, both Hamlin and Chastain would advance to the Final Four. However, Christopher Bell, who entered the race down 33 points to the cut line, quickly shifted the standings after he took control of the race on lap 324, appearing to be running away with it until Landon Castle blew a tire with 34 laps remaining, bringing out the yellow. The caution was a lifesaver for Chastain, who was down 4 points to Hamlin and 2 seconds behind the next closest car for position. And to sweeten things up for him, Hamlin's pit crew would botch the final pit stop, allowing Chastain to cycle out just in front of him. However, Hamlin's car had performed much better than Chastain's all day, so on the restart he would rough him up as much as he could to try and hold off Hamlin, before he finally had to concede the position, slotting him just 2 points ahead of Hamlin to the cut line. But the 11 continued to pass the cars he had lost positions to on pit road, or had taken 2 tires, while Ross remained stagnant, putting Chastain as the one who was now 2 points out, following Hamlin passing both Briscoe and Byron off a turn 4 with 3 to go. Entering the final lap, Chastain still found himself on the outside looking in, desperate for a spot in the Championship 4 to keep his season alive for another week, and with one final lap ahead of him, he'd make a split-second decision that forever changes life.
Get in as the Championship 4, Bell out of turn 4, he's gonna do it! He's won his way into the championship!
Let's go get us a championship.
And the fight for the points, right at the line! The one of Chastain past Hamlin!
Holy did you see that? That's literally the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. What's the one doing? He was trying to hold it wide open and go. He did it. That is insane. He passed people doing that? Yeah, he got in the Final Four doing that.
The racing world was left in awe following the pass, as drivers on the radio couldn't believe what they had just seen. But just like that, Chastain had secured his place into the Championship 4. The move quickly became NASCAR's most viral moment in its history, earning hundreds of millions of views across all social media platforms throughout the week, thrusting Chastain straight into stardom. But that wasn't on his mind then, as he still had a championship to chase in Phoenix just a few days later. Going up against Joey Logano, Christopher Bell, and Chase Elliott for the title, Chastain would roll off the grid last among them in 25th, at a track being mostly known for being tough to pass at, yet he'd drive from 25th to 13th by the end of stage 1. However, it soon became clear that he didn't have the pace to win the race, or compete with his fellow Championship 4 drivers, as throughout stage 2 he'd struggled to get into the top 5 with the other 3 championship contenders. So when pit strategy cycled the frontrunners back to him, he would need to do everything in his power to pass them.
Into the wall on the inside, just brushing it, and the caution comes back out.
Look at that steering wheel, Jeff. That steering wheel's not straight. He's got some.
The wreck ended Elliott's season, leaving Chastain with only the goal of beating the 22 and the 20. However, over the next 90 laps, Chastain was no match for the 22 of Joey Logano, who would easily cruise to his second championship, while Chastain would wrap up the season with a runner-up points finish, which was astounding for a driver who had finished all the way down in 20th the year prior in the standings. But could he repeat this success again? Entering 2023, the expectations for Chastain were sky high, and he wouldn't disappoint. Sitting first in the standings after the 11th race of the season at Dover, while also continuing his aggressive and sometimes reckless driving style, leading to him punching fellow driver Noah Gragson during the post-race at Kansas, after Gragson tried to show his displeasure for being walled. All this eventually reached its boiling point the week after at Darlington, when following a restart where Kyle Larson put Chastain in the wall, he'd turn around and do the very same thing to Larson the next restart, but this time wrecked each of them out of the race, eventually leading to the most famous owner in NASCAR, Rick Hendrick, calling out Chastain, stating, "He doesn't have to be that aggressive. You just don't run people up in the fence. He's got talent, but he's making a lot of enemies out there. It's really getting old with these guys." Following that, Chastain seemed to tone down his aggressiveness a tad bit, going on to win at Nashville a month later to seal his ticket to the playoffs, yet would end up being eliminated quickly in the round of 12 following the Roval race, after a wreck the week prior at Talladega derailed his entire round. He'd wrap up 2023 as the first driver in NASCAR's playoff era to win the race as a driver not in the Final Four, by winning at Phoenix after already being eliminated. And before the 2024 season kicked off, he'd get a new change to his paint schemes, as following Kevin Harvick's retirement, Busch Beer and Anheuser-Busch selected Ross Chastain as their driver for many years to come. However, with this new sponsor, 2024 would be Chastain's worst as a Trackhouse driver, as following a slew of races throughout the regular season that included new winners and a bunch of overtime finishes, Chastain would hemorrhage points and eventually miss the playoffs entirely. Nevertheless, his season wouldn't be a total letdown, for in the 30th race of the year at Kansas, he'd capture his lone win of the season.
Checkered flag is waiting, and it's going to be win number 1 for season 2024 for Car 1. Ross Chastain and Trackhouse Racing win in Kansas.
So where does that leave Ross after a lifetime's worth of work? As of now in 2025, Chastain has earned a 5-star ride in NASCAR, with one of the biggest sponsors in the sport ready to back him for many years to come, solidifying himself as a star who can compete for wins week in and week out, as well as a possible championship threat. But his journey into the sport was nothing short of extraordinary. From his humble beginnings on a watermelon farm in Alva, Florida, to making headlines every chance he got in America's biggest motorsport. Chastain through his time in the sport became a symbol of perseverance, as he's not just another driver in the field, he's an underdog who refused to back down, with an aggressive driving style and willingness to push the limits that few drivers can match. But beyond the victories and impressive moves, Ross Chastain represents something greater. He is the embodiment of chasing dreams, and of never letting circumstances define what a person can achieve.